Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another Pastors Training Pastors presented to you by the Pastor Secretary. I'm Mishka, and tonight we have with us the National Director of Black Church Ministries, Dr. Mark A. Croston. Dr. Croston, good evening.
Well, good evening. I'm excited to be able to be here with you on today to share a little bit. What I'm going to share comes from my new book, which is Big Results Leadership. So let me just share my screen and then we'll be ready to go. So you should be able to see my screen now. And so I just want to make mention to you that there are a number of additional free giveaways that are available. And so if you'll scan this QR code, there are a number of really nice digital giveaways that you can get for free at that particular code. I'll put that up again at the end of the presentation on today. So as we're going through, we're going to talk about this is actually the first chapter in my new book, Study Your New Ministry Context. So let's talk about a few pandemic realities. We're coming out of this pandemic time. I don't know about you, but when I was in school, nobody ever talked to me about a pandemic. It was never on a spelling test that I can recall. And we never had any sociology classes or anything else. But we're in this new reality now, having come through one. What do we know? We're in the 157th week of the COVID-19 pandemic. The 1,102nd day is today. Closed church facilities contribute to growing negative sociological impact. And sometimes we don't realize just how important our churches are to the communities that we serve. More than just the preaching and the teaching, churches have a profound impact on every community where they're located. And so financial, emotional, marital problems, family cohabitation, divorce, violence, theft, depression, suicide, and more. All of these are impacted by the presence of a church in the community. So you're really doing a great job as you're leading your church in your community. But we need these churches thriving in order to make sure that we are dealing with these other issues. Here's a problem. Church membership is in decline. It was in decline before the pandemic, and the pandemic has only hastened the decline. So 2 studies about lostness came out in the last year and a half. One from Gallup poll, which said that for the first time in U.S. history, more people in the United States are not claiming church membership than are. 47%. Only 47% claim membership in anybody's church. And then Gallup came out with research, Pew came out with research, and their research said that the number of people claiming Christianity has dropped to 63%. Now, let me put this in some context. They had predicted in 2010 that the decline of American Christianity would go from 78% to 63% by 2050. Here we are. What year is this? That's right, 2023. And we're already seeing the 2050 decline. And so this is just a steep decline. Now, the good news is, and we don't have time to talk about this, this is American Christianity, not global Christianity. Global Christian numbers actually remain the same over this period where American Christianity is in decline. So you might be saying, well, hold it. How can one of these studies say 47% and the other 63%? I'm glad you've been paying attention. Let me say that the first one really talks about church connection. These people haven't all given up on God. They've given up on us. They've given up on the way we do church. They've given up on the way we live out the Christian life. They've given up on the way we talk about the gospel. And they know that something is not connecting right. And so they have given up on the church, not Jesus. The second one is probably a little more troubling because this is really a God connection issue where the people have actually given up on the whole idea of God. So this makes the United States then the third largest, let me use this word, heathen nation in the world. So if you want to go on a mission trip to share with some heathens, the gospel with some heathens, you don't even have to buy a plane ticket anymore. All you have to do is go outside. We follow China and India, number 3, the United States. And you know, the United States loves to be number 1 at everything, right? So, what's the next reality? Your church facility may be in the same location, but the world around it has changed. What are some probable reasons for all of this? The barn door has changed. Well, it used to be the case that the church and the pastor were in some ways gatekeepers and filters of information, and people would hear things. They'd come to church. The pastor would talk about them from a biblical perspective, and it would help us all to have a biblical worldview. But now, with the invention of the radio, the television, the computer, the internet, and social media, right? We are bombarded with information from everywhere. It comes to us unfiltered and unfettered. And now people don't even care whether the information that they're giving you is even true. And so the barn door has changed. Second, I would think over the last 60 years in particular, the church has focused more on growth and legislation than transformation. I would say this is true for Black church and white church. Come on, focus more on growth and legislation than transformation. But Paul tells us in Romans 8, remember, there are some things the law cannot do because it is weakened by the human nature, but God did when he sent his son, Jesus Christ. Third, and so consequently, there's less societal stigma. It used to be that you used to have to claim that you were a member of a church, and now you don't even have to claim that you're a member of a church anywhere. Increased competition, right? So some of you may have seen Will Smith's movie Concussion. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch that. Will Smith's movie Concussion. It's about football players and concussions. And in that movie, there's a true quote from the NFL. In that movie, the NFL says, "We own Sunday." They actually said that. We own Sunday. And so we're walking around the church thinking it's the Lord's day and we own it. And the NFL has declared, no, 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 we own Sunday. Tell the truth. How many of you all have moved your worship time in order to accommodate Sunday football games and other sporting events going on in your community and other things, right? So we got to think on this. Fifth, the new habit of home participation. Now, I must say that I love church, right? I've been in church all my life. But when the churches got shut down, I have to tell you, I actually did like some of that, right? I like getting up out of my bed in the morning, getting my cup of coffee, and then going down to my easy chair while I'm putting the service on the television. And while sipping my cup of coffee, watching the Reverend sweat, right? All right. So some of this is not going away, right? We've introduced a new thing to people. We told them that you could have church and you didn't have to be in the building, and people bought it then, and they're still buying it now. It doesn't change just because you've opened your church back up. So before the pandemic, 2019, only 22% of churches had a real internet presence and some kind of streaming. And now over 74% have some kind of online presence, right? So, number 6, lowering confidence in churches. This is really troubling to me. Every year they do a rating of institutions by public confidence levels. And so you'll see that the church is number 6. Number 6. Huh? At only 37% of people have confidence in the local church. 70% have confidence in small business. 69% have confidence in the military. 51% have confidence in the police department. 44% in the medical system. 38% in the president, and only 37% in the church. This is troubling. This is a problem. Also, the research has come out about the trust level in pastors, and it is now historically low. The trust level usually hangs around 78% historically, right? Prior to 2002, the trust level almost didn't waver, 78% trusting in the pastors. And now, what is it? It's about 34, 30% believe pastors have high ethical standards. That is a real problem. That is a real problem. Because look, if people don't have confidence in the church, and if they don't have confidence in the pastors, how can they have confidence in the gospel we preach? So this is quite a issue. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to move through these slides quickly, but if you go ahead and scan that QR code, I will send you a digital copy of all the things that I'm putting up here so you can take your time, sit down with your church leaders, talk about these things, and then what you're going to do to continue to move your church forward. So what's the last one? Number 7, biblical illiteracy of our members, right? Maybe I could blame all the rest of the stuff on somebody else, maybe. But number 7, we've got to own for ourselves, right? Nobody else is in charge of biblical literacy of your members and my members but us. Come on. You got to own it before you can fix it. In a survey of graduating seniors, half thought Sodom and Gomorrah were husband and wife. 29% of children 8 through 15 did not know that the Christmas story was in the Bible. Come on. 54% of their parents thought the Hunger Games was a Bible story. And 1 in 5 teens do not believe the Bible is divinely inspired. And this is the question that where things are today. What are you going to do about it? In a crisis moment in her society, Esther went to her uncle Mordecai for some advice. And so Uncle Mordecai told her she needed to go and talk to the king. And she didn't want to go talk to the king. She said, no, if the king doesn't raise up his royal scepter, she said, they might take my head off. And Uncle Mordecai said this to Esther in this moment of crisis. He said, if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come, let's say, to our people from another place. Just remember this, God is still on the throne. God is still in charge. He has not abdicated any authority. He still has all power in the palm of his hand, and he has a providential plan that he's working out. And I read the end of the book, and in the end of the book, it says he wins. He has dominion and authority over everything. Come on. And so deliverance will come from another place, but you and your father's family will be destroyed. And pastor, friend, who knows? Perhaps you have come to your pastoral position for such a time as this. See, we're living through a postmodern age in a post-Christian society. I know there's two words that we don't use all the time, but let me just say a little bit about them. First, let me talk about the idea of what we mean by postmodern. So here's a graphic that says a number of things. Let me just look at the third line where it talks about authority, the authority of God. Let me get my pointer here, my red laser pointer. So the authority of God. Let's talk about that line there. And right, so in the pre-modern time, pre-modern would be 1900 and before. And during this time, church members, non-church members, that God was the authority. But from 1900 to about the 1960s, logic and science became authority. What does the logic say? What does science say? And some people moved away from God and they moved toward logic and science being the final authority, right? And so one of the things we about um, uh, evolution and whether evolution was the real deal. But you know, the one thing that the scientists can never prove about evolution is how the beginning began. Come on now. They cannot answer the prime mover question. And so, but logic and science became the authority. And in the postmodern time, from the 60s and 70s forward, the authority rests in the self and the group. And so you've heard this. You've heard people say, well, that's your truth, right? They'll say something and you'll say something. They say, well, that's your truth. That's not my truth. And so what they're saying to us is that I can have a truth that doesn't line up with your truth. In fact, it might totally contradict your truth. And that's okay because that's your truth. How can they say that? Because the authority for them is in the self and it's in whatever the group says. And so if my group says that the sky is purple instead of blue, then for us it's purple, right? And if another group said at the same time, no, the sky is orange, not purple, because the group says it, for them, that is true. That's all they care about. They don't care about whether you can quantify it or validate it. It's what does the group say? This is part of the postmodern mindset. So, so where does that take us? And so you'll get some other stuff that you can dig into. Don't have time to talk about all of those, but we're in a postmodern mindset in a post-Christian society. Post-Christianity is the situation in which Christianity is no longer the dominant civil religion of a society, but has gradually assumed, think about this, values, culture, worldview that are not necessarily Christian. Post-Christian tends to refer to the loss of Christianity's monopoly in a historically Christian society. So part of what we're seeing happening is what we'll call faith deconstruction. So think about this. There are three stages to faith: construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction. So what is faith construction? Well, how did we all come to faith in the first place? Well, for many of us, we came to church maybe because our parents bought us, and we watched the pastor. We watched what the pastor did. We watched what the pastor wore. We listened to what the pastor said, and this helped to define and develop our faith. And then we watched the church members, and we watched the church members in response to the pastor. What did they do? What did they say? How did they act? And that informed our faith. And then we went home and we watched our families. Now, if our family lined up at home with the things the pastor said in the church, then that developed our faith in one way. But if our family lives were totally contradictory to what the pastor said in the church, then what that taught us about faith was that church and faith was really just something that you did on Sunday because it was a part of what we do, but then you live out the rest of the week however you want. Come on. And then they watch the community around them. So how our faith developed is not just about what's in the book. It's also about how people lived out that faith and talked about that faith around us. That constructed our faith. And so, yeah, we have a lot of people with faith that's constructed lopsided, right? Maybe it's constructed and there's some pieces missing. Well, that's all because that's the way their faith was constructed by the words they heard, the studies they participated in, and the people and community that were around them. All of us can say that. So, what is deconstruction then? It is taking a part of an idea, practice, tradition, belief, or system into its smaller components in order to examine their foundation, truthfulness, usefulness, and impact, right? And so it is taking a massive inventory of your faith, tearing every doctrine from the cupboard, turning it over in your hand to see whether or not you ought to put it back. And this is really very true, especially for people that grew up in the church all their lives. How many of you grew up in church, right? And so this is especially true for people who grew up in church. And so when you grew up in church, what happened? You did stuff lots of times because your parents told you to do it. You did it because it was your family's tradition and custom to do it. And then you became a young adult. Come on. And you went off to college or to the military or wherever you went, right? And then you started drawing away from the teaching that you had learned all your life. Why did you do that? Part of the reason you did that was faith deconstruction, trying to figure out, is this the real faith? And does this faith really fit me? Why faith deconstruction? Why faith deconstruction is a necessary part of a right relationship with God. And so we have done this, all of us, come on, tell the truth, have done this in different ways with a lot of different issues. Some of us have changed, right? I want you to think about all of these issues. Think about the way you thought about them when you were a teenager, and now think about how you think about them now. For some of these haven't changed, and thank God some of them should never change, but some of these have changed, right? Some of these we've changed some things, right? How can I tell, right? When I was growing up, women couldn't wear pants to church, and now they wear them all the time. That's faith deconstruction. We used to think that people had to dress a certain way in their Sunday best, come on, in order to come to church. And we've come to a point where we recognize, well, your clothes really don't make the difference in terms of who you really are. In fact, right now, we're trying to reach a generation that doesn't own a suit. Come on now. So if we're telling them you got to have a suit on for Sunday morning and they don't own a suit, think of the barrier we're putting up for the gospel. And so a number of other things. I remember when we couldn't have guitars or drums or all those kind of instruments in church. And now we have them all, right? Used to be that all church had to be at 11 o'clock for whatever reason. And now church is any kind of time, right? So, you can think about all the things that have changed in church life since you were a child. That's all part of faith deconstruction, taking the traditions of the fathers, which are good, but they're good for their time, figuring out what they now need to be for this time. Some of these are changeless. The Bible is the eternal word of God. That should never change. Salvation is in his son, Jesus Christ. That should never change. Come on. God is the creator and sustainer of everything that ever is. And that should never change, right? There's some of these that should never, ever change. But some of these we will think about. We think about maybe a little different way as time goes on. So what happens when people start deconstructing their faith? Maybe they'll disengage from the worship, stop coming to church, leave the Christian community. Maybe they'll abandon the brotherhood, disregard all the preaching and teaching that they've learned as they were coming along. And maybe they'll even refuse to take the sacraments. G.K. Chesterton says, every generation loses the gospel, and every generation is charged with its recovery. And so what can you do when somebody's going through faith deconstruction? Accept that you won't understand everything, right? Don't make up answers for them. Remind them none of us understand absolutely everything. Use caution in the voices you accept. Remember, remind them you can't eat from everybody's table. Find somebody who speaks honestly that you can trust. Remember that in spite of everything you're going through, Christ still loves you. Tell them never lose hope, and tell them as you're going through this period in their lives, invite Jesus into the process. So what all this faith deconstruction tells us is people are looking for the gospel. The world is hungry for the living bread. So then there's all faith construction. Remember, faith construction, deconstruction, and reconstruction. And remember, deconstruction is actually a part of the cycle of spiritual renewal. Because if you come through the deconstruction process to the other side, you actually come out as a stronger and better disciple of Jesus Christ. And so you can help people in this process. Be transparent about your own failures, doubts, and struggles. Pastor, maybe you need to preach a series on the doctrines of the Bible for today. Determine the needs, what needs to change in your worship in order for people to see Jesus, right? Let me just say that they say that in every generation, people usually like the music best that they listen to between ages 15 and 25. 15 and 25. And I can't help it. I can't help it if I think that the Spinners and the OJs and the Temptations, the Stylistics, Blue Magic, all them folk had the best music. Come on, y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And so, but here's what I know. Even though I got to choose the best music that I resonated with me in my time, I have to recognize that every generation gets the privilege of choosing the music that resonates with them in their time, right? So what needs to change in your worship in order to help people see Jesus? Accept them like Jesus. Lord, I believe. Remember that in Mark 9? Help my unbelief. Help your leaders to be patient coaches. Get everybody into a small group and use a trustworthy Bible curriculum and extend a clear and compelling invitation without churchy language. I got some stories to tell about churchy language, right? Most of the time, we don't even know all the churchy language we're talking about. So what is it that we're getting into now? We're in one of these times where you got to take a fresh look at everything. Remember Moses when he came out of brought the nation of Israel out of bondage in Egypt, and so from Egypt to the promised land was really only about 500 miles. In fact, you can actually validate that. You can take out your phone or computer and check the distance and the journey. You can say, give me a way to get from Jerusalem maybe or Tel Aviv, Israel to Cairo, or let's say Alexandria, Egypt. It's around 500 miles. They're going to give you a few different routes that you can take. Interesting. One of the routes is going to say, if you take this route, you will need to take a ferry. And that's probably the one Moses took because it goes across the Red Sea, but he didn't need a ferry. Come on, because he parted the Red Sea. Well, it only would take about 40 days to get from Egypt to the promised land. And when they get to the edge of this new land, Canaan, which we had nicknamed what? The promised land. And why do we call it the promised land? Because God had promised it to his people. And you need to remember that. In spite of everything you see in the news, in spite of every negative trend that might be happening, you need to remember that God has promised us the land. God has promised us the victory. And so you need to go ahead and take what the Lord has promised. And so what did he do? He got a committee together and sent one from each of the 12 tribes and sent them in. He did not send them into the land in order to determine whether they should go in the land. He sent them into the land so that they could see what the land was like, get some strategies for how to take over the land, and to inspire the rest of the people about the land. And so look at what he says in Numbers 13 here. See what the land is like, whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. Is the land they live in good or bad? Are the cities they live in encampments or fortifications? Is the land fertile or unproductive? Are there trees in it or not? Be courageous, he says. And by the way, bring back some of the fruit from the land because it was the season of the first ripe grapes. And so he's really just trying to get people motivated and excited, but he recognizes that they have to take a new, fresh look at the land. Remember, the land they were going to, the promised land, was not some vacant tract that nobody had ever built on before. No, these were cities, fortified, walled, right? There were roads and there were people living there. And in spite of all of that, God said, I'm giving you this land. So I don't have time to go through all of these slides, but just remember that when you look at the land, you got to look at the differences in the people. The people are different, right? See, understand, and appreciate the differences. What works in one place may not work in another because the people are different, right? Our generations make us different, and our genders make us different, right? I'm not going to take time to parse the generations. You probably have done that at some point, but you'll get this and you can look and think about what are some of the differences, the nuanced differences in each of the generations. We're experts in some ways at our own generation, but every other generation is not like ours. Just like our generation, the one you are part of, has some uniquenesses, so do all of the other generations as well. My kids, I have a blended family with two Gen Ys, millennials, and two Gen Zs. Two Gen Ys or millennials and two Gen Zs. And let me just tell you, they are different. They are as different as night and day. And so you need to think about the differences in each of these generations if we're going to win them with the gospel. And then genders are different, right? Men and women are just different, right? God made us that way. A man only needs about eight words, and we can describe every color that there is. Come on, you know what I'm talking about, right? Isn't this right? And isn't this right? Right? So we're just different. I'm not saying one is good or better or worse than the other. They're just different, and you need to understand that, right? So Our education makes us different. Our experiences make us different. Our professions and politics make us different. Our ethnicity makes us different. And our culture makes us different. Those are two different things, ethnicity and culture. Just remember that a little over a year ago, Whoopi Goldberg got kicked off her own show for a little while because she didn't know the nuanced difference between race, ethnicity, and culture. And so I put a few things here to remind us of what those differences are so that we can understand them. And then where we live is different, right? We all live different places. So you're going to get this link to Data USAIO, and you can put your specific city and state into this link and get the demographics for your area, right? So a lot of times when we build churches in places, we just say, well, here's a piece of land and here's a building that we can use, and let's make that into a church. But you know, that's not the way most businesses do that, right? When you have successful businesses in your area, they have already looked at the traffic patterns. They know the socioeconomics of the particular area. They know the times that people do different things. They know the way that they celebrate different times of the year, and they know how many are single, how many are married, how many kids they have, how much education. They know all of these things, and then they put their business there, and they say, we know our business could be successful here if it has the right manager, right? So think about this. McDonald's sells the same thing in every store, right? Starbucks sells the same thing in every store. Name it. Walmart sells the same thing in every store, right? And a number of these chains. And yet you'll notice that some of these chains thrive, the individual locations, and some of these individual locations of these chains do not thrive. They struggle or they die. Why is that? If they're selling the same thing and one thrives and one doesn't, I'm going to tell you that success rises and falls on leadership. That's true in all of these chain restaurants and stores. That's also true in the life of our churches. Success rises and falls on leadership. That's why your position is so vitally important. I was just in Miami, and so let me just talk about Miami for a second. And so you can plug in your city and see the census data. What's the population like? What's the median income? All these kind of things. And then you can look at what's the racial mixture of the particular community and how has it changed over the years. Here's 2020 and here's 2013, 2020 and 2013. How has it changed? All of these impact the way that we do ministry. And then there are lots of other pieces of information that you can pull out that help to inform us about who it is we're serving and what ministries can be effective in this particular area. You can't just look, if you're in Florida, you can't just look at somebody in California and say it's going to work because the culture and the people are different. If you're in Oklahoma, you can't look at somebody in New York City or vice versa and say, well, they're doing this and it's working there. I'm going to do that here because the people and the culture are different. You're working with same gospel, but different stuff. Come on. And so you have to understand where you are in order to understand what can really work where you are. Some of y'all know something about planting, right? And you know that you got to have the right kind of soil to plant the right stuff, you know? So you can't plant everything in every piece of soil. You need the right soil. The soil has to have the right composition, the temperature and atmosphere, and the water has to be right in that location. And that's why they don't grow everything everywhere. But the farmers know this can work here. And you have to be smart like that and understand the seed of the gospel is good. Come on now. It ain't the seed's problem. Remember that parable where the sower went out and he sowed seed, right? He just sowed it, threw it everywhere. And the scripture says some fell on thorny soil, and some fell on thin soil, and some fell on rocky soil, right? Some got eaten up by the birds. But he said, and some fell on good soil. So I just want to say that 3/4 of the seed that the sower sowed did not flourish. It died. But this is what I want to draw out of there right now. The reason it died was not the seed's fault. Come on now. Come on. The reason it died was not the fault of the seed. The seed was good. Didn't matter where it fell, the seed was good. And what is the seed? You read the end of the parable. The seed, the word of God. And so the word of God is good. It never fails. It always works. God, whatever God's got to accomplish, it's going to accomplish it. The seed is good. But sometimes we think about whether we're sowing, how we're sowing it, when we're sowing it, where we're sowing it, so that we can get the right results. About this, how does your current community differ from the one in which you grew up? You were at one place, and now you're in a totally different place. So how does the community that you now live in from you grew up? It's better. That's true. But it's being observant, being able to see those things, that to be able to do what God expects of us in our time. So I'm trying to listen to a special slide. Because remember, peace. I'll send you this whole piece. If you just fill out the piece, and at the that I'm going to show you in the QR code. So here's what I want to say. I just want to go back 2 slides. But I guess something in the way. Oh, that's what he turned this off. That's what it meant. All right. There we go. All right. So that's probably to keep I have. I want to focus on verse number 2. To serve the present age. Not the past. Age of the 20 single digit 20 teens. 23. Task is to this age, serve this present age, my calling to fulfill. Oh, may it all my powers engage to do my master's will. And so think about that as moving forward. We want to come alongside you to help you in the process. And so we offer some free 3-day intensives for pastors to go through research and information and strategies that will help you to be successful. We've got one coming up shortly in Chicago, and they're free for you. All you got to do is get an invitation and get to the location. We pick up your hotel, your meals, and the conference cost, and hopefully send you back with some tools that will help you to be successful. we've got a great national conference. We would love to see you at our Black Church Leadership and Family Conference. This will be our 30th year. It is off the chain, one of the greatest events we have. And then if you come to the Essentials Conference for Pastors, then we also offer you a follow-up Big Results Conference. So it's one thing to get this information for you with the other pastors. It's something else to press it down into your church family. And so the Big Results Conference is an offering that we have to help you press this information down into your own church family. And then a great Bible study for Sundays and weekdays is our Bible study. It's our urban cultural forward Bible study, actual users on the cover, and a great tool that you can use. Many ways you can contact us. That'll be in all of the information. But there it is. There's your QR code. Get your camera, scan the code, and we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for allowing us this time to share just a peek into all that God is doing and the great things God wants to continue to do through you. God bless you, friends.
Thank you so much, Dr. Croston. This was some amazing information. I'm going to request the information so that I can get it out as well. Oftentimes, people will come in after the live stream is over. And so the information, how long is it valid? I know you said one of the conferences was coming up soon, but how long is that?
Right. The link will be good through June. But if they take the link, then they'll be able to get everything else they need to know. All the information about all of those other things and a bunch of other free digital items are all available there.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you again so much. I truly appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Yes, sir. Good night.